Let's make some more lazy, unimaginative content. I'm doing a UFC welterweight tier list. I'm not going to fuck about with the intro. Let's get straight in with the first entry of the video. Some of these are active fighters, others are not, and we're going to start with Rory MacDonald. His potential was right at the very top. However, for his whole career, I'm going to stick him in elite, I think. He was the heir apparent of the great GSP, and in the UFC, he made the title. He had a title shot, one of the best fights of all time at UFC 189 against the legendary Robbie Lawler. He lost that fight. But he was at the top of the UFC's welterweight class for a number of years, and then he left and won the Bellator title at a time when winning a Bellator belt still meant a little bit. It had a little bit more weight. I think he underperformed on his overall career potential. He definitely could have done more, but overall he was always an elite fighter, very well-rounded as well, just like GSP. Moving on to one of my favourite fighters on the current roster, it's Gilbert Burns. I'm tempted by elite, but I'm going to put him top contender. Quite self-explanatory. He's a top 170-pound contender. Not much more I could say, but no, it's interesting with Burnsley because I think over the years there's been a lot of talk about a 165, 162-pound weight class. If that was a thing, I think Burns would be, if not the champion, he'd be up there, 100%. I mean, he was the first one to show that Khamzat was human, and he also dropped Usman. Yes, he got finished in the end, but still, there have been some highlights in Burns' illustrious MMA career, and I love him. So I was tempted by the bottom of elite, but I think with me head on, I'm going to say top contender. On we move to the natural born killer, Mr. Carlos Condit. He was mustard. He was double mustard. Now I know he never held the title, and there are going to be some people who held the title that are going to be below him. Little spoiler for you, but how can you not love Carlos Condit? I mean, yes, he was an interim heavyweight, welterweight title holder. That counts 100%. And as much as he was obviously most known as a kickboxer, he had incredible jiu-jitsu off his back in particular. There were not many times in the career of GSP where he ever looked like he was in trouble. But the head kick off this man, he was about 5 seconds away from taking that belt from him. The only person apart from Matt Serra to take a belt from him. That would have been incredible. Didn't happen, but still, great fighter to watch. And he was around right at the time when I was first really getting into the sport, right in his pomp. So he was one that I really enjoyed watching. I remember staying up till stupid o'clock and watching him fight Dan Hardy. That was one of my early memories of the sport. So yeah, I love Carlos Condit. He's going in mustard. Next up on the list, I'm going to go for one of my favourite fighters, but again, with me head on, I think Masvidal has to go in the bottom tier, which is half decent. That's kind of what he was for the entirety of his MMA career. He was never bad, but he was never that good either. I mean, he fought for the belt at lightweight in Strikeforce against Melendez, lost badly. And then he fought for the UFC welterweight belt twice, lost badly both times. I can't put him any higher than this, as much as I love him, but he had one. It's really hard to say, but he did only really have one good year. I mean, like I said, he was never a bad fighter. Normally in good fights as well, but yeah. A lot of people, not a lot of people, at least 3 or 4 people on this list have beaten him, so he has to go bottom tier. This next one is dead tough. Wonderboy. I've had him in between mustard and elite in my whole script. I think I'm going to put him the top of elite. It's very close there though. I think Wonderboy is arguably the best welterweight that's never held any kind of gold, undisputed or interim. I think I would probably say that. There are a couple of contenders there, and there are a few that we'll go through in this video, but if he's not there, he's definitely up there, if you catch me drift. I don't think there's been as neat a striker in the UFC. In terms of the technique of the karate that he can bring, I think he's a better karate practitioner than Lyoto Machida. That may be short-sighted. If you disagree, let me know. I just think he's a joy to watch, but I do think in recent times, the blueprint on how to beat him has been used more. Like Belal Muhammad and Gilbert Burns have all used the same blueprint, and I expect Shavkat Rakmanov to use a similar one and beat him on Saturday night. So, nowadays, he's not an elite 170-pounder. He's very good, but he's not elite anymore. But over the course of his entire UFC career, he is elite, and that's why he's going there. And I'd put him above Rory Mack simply for longevity in the UFC. Next up, the man of the weekend, Leon Edwards. I really want to put him here, but at the moment, I'm going to put him at the top of mustard, and he will stay at the top of that rank, by the way. As much as I would love to put Leon at the tier above, in my opinion, I only wanted three fighters up there, and I think there are 3 who deserve that spot more than Leon right now. If he can beat Colby and then maybe a Belal Muhammad, then we can talk about maybe shifting him up. I'll do another one next year if he's done that, but no, for now, he's top of mustard. I just think that you need to beat more than one fighter in a title fight in order to be different gravy. I'm not saying that 2 wins over Usman are not good. I mean, Usman, fucking spoiler alert, is going to be in different gravy. But I just think he needs a bit more behind his kind of title reign, you know what I mean? That being said, I fully back and expect him to beat Colby Covington this weekend, and I have a video on the channel all about me breakdown and my prediction. If you've not seen it, check it out on the channel. Shameless plug, let's move on. Oh, Ian Gary, you poor little thing. I'm going to go more on a potential here because we've not seen a lot of him. I could put him elite, but for now, I think I'm going to be cautious and put him top contender. I do expect him to beat Luque this weekend. I expect that fight to go quite similar to when Wonderboy fought Luque in 2019. Again, I mentioned that on my breakdown video. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. I'm sorry, that's the last time I'm doing that. But no, I think he beats Luque. Whether he beats a Shavkat Rakmanov or a Gilbert Burns or a Colby Covington or a Leon Edwards even, who knows. But I think what we've seen of him there, as much as he's obviously the talk of the town right now, there's still a lot of gift there. He's a very talented guy in that cage. But I can't say that you're elite if I have a long-lasting memory in my head of Song Kanan dropping you. I can't. It's just one of those things that's ingrained in my brain until I see him beat a legitimate top 10 or even top 5 guy, which Luque is. That would be a start. But no, I do rate Ian Gary as a fighter, not so much as a bloke. I don't rate his choice in women either, but I'm not going into that. I'm not getting sued. Let's move on. I found this next man very difficult on the ranking where I was going to put him. It's Johnny Hendricks. If you look at his career, there were times where he was all the way up here, and there are times where he dropped down. But I think overall, I'm going to put him elite just there, I think. But it's a difficult call. I'm going to start with the elephant in the room. He beat GSP. He did. That first round, there's no way you can give it George's way. 1, it's definitely for Hendricks, means he won. 3-2. And if you don't agree, watch the fight and actually score it properly, okay? I'm not hearing any fucking pushback on that one. However, is it that much of a coincidence that he was knocking everybody out and literally beating GSP, and then as soon as USADA came in, he just dropped off the face of the earth, got fat, went up to middleweight, missed weight 74 times and then retired? I don't know. Now, of course, there's no proof of that, and there never will be. I don't think the UFC even knew what a needle was until about 2014, but anyway, whatever. I'm not going to go into that. That's not my business. So, but it is in my mind. It is in my mind in terms of deliberating where I'm going to put Hendricks. So I think he had some mustard moments, and I think he had some really shitty moments. So I think also the fact he was a UFC champion does lift him up the list a bit. That's why I would have him over a Rory Mack, but below a Wonderboy. I mean, 1, Wonderboy did beat Johnny Hendricks, but 2, with the fact that I'm definitely not the only one that has the concerns about the legitimacy of the bloodstream of Johnny Hendricks in the late 2000s, early 2010s, that's definitely hurt his legacy somewhat. And I think Wonderboy is definitely in higher regard and status than Johnny Hendricks these days. So that's why I'm going to put him where he is. But in his time, I loved him when he knocked out John Fitch, because John Fitch is a very, very talented mixed martial artist, but God, was he boring. Anyway, let's move on. I'm actually going to be fair when I talk about Belal Muhammad, alright? As much as I'd love to put him down here and laugh at him, he's elite. He just is, okay? I know, it's not something that any of us want to actually admit to ourselves, but it's true, okay? Belal Muhammad has, I think, at least 4, maybe 5 wins in the top 10. He's beaten Luque, he's beaten Sean Brady, he's beaten Wonderboy. I'm probably missing one off the top of my head, but, I mean, this is difficult because I do not like Belal at all. Anyone who's watched my channel for any period of time will know that, but he's earned his title shot. He has. Oh, I had a shower after this. I feel dirty, but no. Alright, in all seriousness, is he exciting to watch? No. Is he basically John Fitch of 2023? Kind of, yeah. But is he elite in the welterweight class right this very second? Yeah, he is. And as much as I would rather see Leon versus Colby, if the UFC was an actual moral company, it would be Edwards versus Belal Muhammad this weekend, but it's not. So, this one time, Mr. Muhammad, I'm going to tip my hat to you, my good mate, okay? You're very, very good. Your wrestling's brilliant. You've got superb cardio. Your striking seems to be getting better. It's still not great, but you're getting there. And yeah, honestly, I tip my hat to you, my friend, okay? It's just, you're very unlikable. A little bit like me, so we probably should be friends. I'm not very likable either, but anyway, the important thing is I'm giving you your flowers here today, okay? So, I don't know, clip this up and send it to your nan, okay? Because it's not happening again. Belal Muhammad is an elite fighter. And our first order of different gravy goes to Matt Hughes. Now, full disclosure, I wasn't around watching the UFC during the pomp of Matt Hughes. That might be difficult for some of you to believe, but I am only 22, okay? However, when I first got into the sport, I dove pretty deep into the archives. Like, I probably went about 3 fucking miles deep into the crack of what am I even saying? I went deep into the archives of the UFC is what I'm trying to say in a less Ron Jeremy kind of way, but you get my point. And, I mean, yeah, in the first kind of decade and a bit of the UFC, before the ascendance of GSP, he was the best 170-pounder of all time. He came out of the MFS gym, very, very good gym. He had some great fights with, I believe it was Frank Trigg, he had a good one with. That may have been one fight of the year, if I remember correctly. Again, any of you ancient blokes out there watching this, or girls, a few of you are girls, actually 3% of you are girls, so shout out to you ladies. But anyway, yeah, I didn't watch a lot of Hughes at the time. I have watched most of his fights back at least once in the time since. And he deserves different gravy regardless of whether I watched him or not. I still think that if you were to get prime Matt Hughes and dump him in the welterweight class right now, he would effectively be a Belal Muhammad, realistically. But there is another fighter from an era even pre-Matt Hughes who is hurt by the time frame, and we'll get to him later on. But Matt Hughes is not even arguably, completely definitely a top 3 welterweight of all time and deserves the different gravy spotlight. Next up, I'm going to move on to what, in my opinion, is a bona fide future welterweight champion, Shavkat Rakmanov. I'm going to put him elite ahead of Belal Muhammad. I've been talking about Shavkat quite a bit recently, and I always utter the same stuff. So if you heard me say this many times, I apologise. But he's one of these fighters who seems to be able to find a way to finish people in a variety of different ways. But you've got some people like a Derek Lewis, he's only really going to finish you with a knockout. Or a Damian Maia, who's only ever going to finish you on the ground. Shavkat can finish you anywhere. That makes him incredibly dangerous. I think he's the most well-rounded finisher in the division and possibly in the whole organisation right now. I've put him above Belal Muhammad for the simple reason of, if you were to put him in a cage with Leon Edwards right now, I think he'd do better. I think he's a better fighter than Belal Muhammad, and I think where I would have him above an Ian Gary, who's also a prospect, is we've seen him beat a Jeff Neal. We haven't seen that yet from Ian Gary. Like a lot of you, I'm very, very high on Shavkat Rakmanov, and I expect him to hold the belt, like I said at the start of the entry. When? Probably not next year, but I think early 25 is amp time. And I think if Edwards wins the belt, I think he could maybe beat Belal Muhammad in June, and then the end of next year, Shavkat. If it's Colby, I could see the division being a bit iffy. But again, I think he's elite. Even right now, even though he's not the most proven, he's more proven than Ian Gary, and I think he's better overall as a mixed martial artist than Belal Muhammad. That's why I think he goes ahead of Belal Muhammad in elite. Anyway, let's move on. Joining Matt Hughes in different gravy without any form of a debate is the Nigerian nightmare, Kamaru Usman. Usman's legacy in the UFC is interesting. In the lead up to his original title fight against Woodley, he was seen as the guy who was obviously very, very good and very, very talented, but he wasn't getting anybody out of seats. I think 9 of his first 10 or 10 of his first 11 were all by decision, something like that. Obviously, he won them all, which is great, but not the most exciting. It all changed on that UFC 261 knockout of Masvidal. That's when things started to change. He also knocked out Burns earlier on, but that was more of a TKO. The clean flush Masvidal shot was insane. And of course, he had 2 great fights with Covington, and then he lost his belt. So, do you know what I mean? I mean, even now, he holds wins over the current welterweight and 185-pound UFC champion. That has to count for something, right? I don't think there can be a debate about him being different gravy. The only debate here is either behind or in front of Matt Hughes. I've put him in front. I'll openly admit I'm not the largest Usman fan that you will ever see. I don't really like the guy too much. I mean, recently he's got a bit better, but especially like in his title reign, I really didn't like him too much. However, the geezer's different gravy, isn't he? I mean, I don't know why I've spent over 2 minutes literally just saying he's different gravy. He's different gravy. Let's move on. This one I found very, very difficult. Arguably the best jiu-jitsu guy that the UFC has ever seen. It's Damian Maia. After a lot of deliberation, I'm going to put him at the top of top contender. Now, I know that he's for welterweight gold and for middleweight gold, and that has to count for something, and trust me, it did. But the problem that I always had with Damian Maia was he just never rounded out his game. Ever. I suppose it just proves how insane he actually was on the ground, that he was still able to get all the way up to those title fights, and even after that, later on into his career, he was still winning fights. He could still beat most people on the roster in his weight class. I just think if he'd have spent any more time than he did, I'm not saying he never tried to maybe make his boxing a bit better. I'm sure he did. He was a mixed martial artist, but if he was just a little bit more like profound on the feet, he would have been a lot higher. The reason why I have to put him here is he lost against Belal Muhammad. Now, I know it's interesting in a way, because Burns beat him. The reason why I'm actually going to put him in top contenders solely after the Belal loss is that was the first time that I can really remember somebody taking down Damian Maia and beating him there over 3 rounds. That was the first time that I remember seeing that. And if your whole thing is about jiu-jitsu and you can get literally held onto on the ground for 15 minutes and not actually find a submission and not be able to change the fight on the feet, it becomes difficult for me to call you an elite mixed martial artist. That is what the elite bar is for. It's for elite mixed martial artists. Now, I know what you're thinking about Wonderboy. He's a striker. However, he had very, very good takedown defense, and he had very good submission defense as well. Maia just never was able to round out the entirety of his game. If he did, I wouldn't have been surprised if he actually held one of those belts at one point, but maybe that's a problem with BJJ. Maybe that's a conversation for a different day. I don't know, but it's controversial. I know a lot of you grappling people out there are going to be annoyed at that, and if you are, let me know in the comments. I'll happily talk to you about it, but yeah, I'm going to put Damian Maia in that tier, I think. I decided I was going to put Luque on this list as well, simply because I had the other 5 on the main card in the welterweight class in this weekend's fight. I thought I might as well put Luque on as well. Now, I really like Luque. I think he's underrated on the ground. I mean, we saw the Michael Chiesa fight. That was a lovely sub. He got on a very, very, very good, high-level, skilled wrestler and grappler in Mike Chiesa. And he's obviously beaten Tyron Woodley and a number of other decent names in the division, but when you compare him to the other people on this list, it's difficult to put him any higher than bottom on the list, and he will be number 20 out of 20, but that's not to say that he's bad. I think Luque is incredibly underrated. He's got one of the best chins in the whole UFC. Loads of people talk about good chins. His is always underrated and often missed out of that conversation completely. I love Luque. He's a great fighter. I think he can give Ian some issues on Saturday night. I don't think he'll beat him. I think he can definitely be his toughest test though. So I thought I'd give him the respect and put him on the list. Next up is the challenger this weekend at UFC 296. It's Colby Covington. I'm going to put him at the bottom of mustard. You could argue that he should go ahead of Carlos Condit. I don't want to hear it. Like I said, I love Condit. I won't hear any slander against the man's name. He's going ahead of Colby. Now, Colby Covington. What can I say? I actually don't mind him. I'm not going to lie. He's effectively a bad rip-off of Chael Sonnen. And by bad, I mean like... Not bad as in he's bad at what he does. He's very good at what he does. Bad as in... It's hard to explain. Like, actually bad. As in mean and nasty, if you get what I'm trying to say. It's worked for him, though. Nobody knew his name until he changed up the gimmick and started being what we know him as now. So you have to give him that. And as a fighter, he's superb. Arguably the best chain wrestler in the UFC. Weaponises his cardio superbly. Always improving on the striking. His hands at this point are actually pretty good. Not sure about the kicks. He throws high kicks a bit weird. They land sometimes and they have a decent amount of pop on them, but they just look weird when he throws them. I'm not going to waste that much time on Colby. I know he's a controversial figure. I know not all of you are going to like him, and I know some of you are going to love him. I'm neither. I can respect the man. I know it's a gimmick he's playing, and he's a superb fighter. He's a mustard fighter. If it wasn't for Usman, he would have already held the belt. Unfortunately for him, I don't expect him to leave Las Vegas with it on Saturday night. I think Leon will beat him. But if he can beat Leon and then get a couple of defences, he's looking at a different gravy entry, which I'm sure means a lot more to him than a UFC title. Let me tell you that for free. But no, I think Colby's mustard. I think if you're not being biased, you have to agree. The easiest choice of this entire list, Rush himself, GSP, right at the very top of different gravy. I don't even really need to talk about GSP that much. It's all already been said. In my opinion, he's the greatest of all time. That's obviously a hot take. You may not agree, but I think when you fail drug tests, that instantly hurts you, and he never did. So even though there was, anyway, not important. I just think if you want to use the word well-rounded about anybody, it would be GSP. Like, if you were a grappler, he would jab your head in and low-kick the bollocks off of you and win over 3 rounds on the feet, or 5 rounds mainly. And if you were a striker, he'd take you down and wrap you up. Very, very simple, and it worked every single time after Matt Serra. That's crazy to think about. I mean, just have a think about the names he beat. Hughes, Hardy, Carlos Condit, Josh Koscheck, Nick Diaz, BJ Penn, Michael Bisping, Johnny Hendricks, and a lot more. John Fitch, fucking John Fitch. Anyway, beat everybody in his era. I don't think I need to say any more about GSP. Like I said, it's already been said, and I'm not going to rehash other people's content. I'm not Kenny Florian. So, yeah, He's the GOAT, like I said, but there's no doubt he's the best welterweight of all time. That's not up for debate. So yeah, let's move on. Now, if I was basing this list on their personalities, old Tara and Woodley would be down here, but I'm not. It's on their fighting career. I'm going to put him in mustard, but I'm actually going to put him below Leon. I think Woodley's actual accolades are very underrated, and a part of that is probably due to the fact that he is a massive arsehole, but it still doesn't mean he's not a good fighter. I mean, that man effectively revolutionised the 170 pound class. I mean, there was GSP, and then there was that kind of Hendricks and Lawler thing going on. He was big, strong, athletic, he had big power in his hands and he could grapple. He was effectively the prototype for Kamaru Usman. Or at least what Usman would become. It's weird actually, because when Woodley was on the come up, he was effectively like Johnny Hendricks. He was a wrestler with heavy hands, and then as it went on, he almost became a bit safe and cautious, whereas Usman started off cautious, and then as his striking improved, his hands and his power started to show more. It's weird, right? But no, in terms of Tyrant, I think there are some holes in the resume. I mean, that Woodley versus Colby fight, it did happen, but if that would have happened during Woodley's title reign, if he'd have then... I was about to say something then, but it's a bit controversial. If he'd have actually beaten prime Colby Covington while he was in his prime himself, there's an argument that he's better than Matt Hughes. I'm going to get shit for that. I'm really sorry, but I mean, Till smashed him up. Maia beat him up. Lawler knocked him the shit out of him. That wasn't even English, but I said it anyway. No, I think Woodley's underrated as a career, but I also think he's a knob. So I think Mustard is fair, but I think Leon's overall better. So that's why I put him there. I'm not going to spend that much time on this one, wonderful people. I think I've even fucked it up. But it's Pat Milotic, and this is going to make no sense at all. I'm going to put him in top contender, which I know is completely insane, but just hear me out. Like I said, I was around, not for the prime of Matt Hughes. However, I came into the sport at a time where Matt Hughes was still very much in the memory, and I was able to go back and look at all of his fights and interviews and all that kind of stuff. Pat Milotic was a long time, not a long time, but he was a decent amount of time, in his prime at least, before Matt Hughes. So I don't have as much knowledge on him. And there's the natural thing of when a sport is young, it's going to get better very quickly. So what I tried to do with Patty Boy was I tried to take the prime version of Pat Milotic, as good as I could understand it, and put him in the 170 pound class right now. And like I said, a sport is going to evolve. So if you would take prime Pat Milotic, and put him at 170 right now, he wouldn't do very well. He would be off this list. He'd be worse than Vicente Luque. But he's a former champion and a pioneer of the entire division. So it would be unfair for me to put him in half decent, because he was better than that in his time. In his time, he was different gravy. But overall, as MMA has evolved, I can't call him elite. And I can't put him half decent because it's very unfair. So I'm going to have to put him top contender. It doesn't make much sense. I'm not going to lie. I'm just going to move on because I think I fucked him up. But anyway, I felt like this man 100% needed a mention. It's Neil Magny. He is going to go half decent. He's no higher than that, but I thought he deserved a spot on this list. Most wins in UFC welterweight history. He's fought everybody and his dog. He's been around for a bloody long time. I just felt like when you hold a record like that, you should be in a video like this, right? Was he ever near a title shot? Not really. Is he effectively like a welterweight Jim Miller? Basically. But I thought I'd just give him a quick little mention here, right at the end, or at least towards the end, and say, Neil Magny, you're a legend in your own right, my friend, and I hope you can do well against Mike Malott, even though if I'm honest, I think he'll beat you. But anyway, Neil, you're an unsung hero, my friend. Let's move on into the final person on this list. And the last man on this list, don't worry, I've not forgot about him, a former welterweight champion, one of my favourite fighters, it's Robbie Lawler. I'm going to put him in mustard. I'm going to put him ahead of Colby, even though Colby beat him, and I'm going to put him below Condit, even though Condit beat him. Well, allegedly, he didn't win that fight, and I love Condit, and I'll die by that. I'll die on that Lauren Hill. So, he's going behind Condit, alright? Cry about it. No, look, I mean, when you talk about services, not just the UFC, but to MMA as well, he went everywhere. He was in Elite XC, he was in Strikeforce, he was in Pride, he was in the IFA, I think, even, I believe, at some point in between his UFC runs. The man was everywhere. The man fought anybody. He was a legend across 2 weight classes as well. I love the way they actually sent him off at UFC 290. That was a lovely little package. I hope they do that more from now on in. But no, look, Lawler's a legend. I mean, the only place I can really start with Robbie Lawler is the second Rory Mack fight. I mean, you're not going to get much better than that. But the 2 fights with Hendricks, the Condit fight, he had some other brilliant ones in there as well. It was just, unfortunately, the likes of Lawler are a dying breed in this sport. And I'm glad he was able to get the celebration that he rightfully deserves. So Lawler, you're a mustard fighter. I think you're going to be greatly missed. Like I said, there's not going to be too many of you left in the next 3 or 4 years. So, yeah, that's how we're going to end on quite a nice note. That was a nice way to end, I think. And that just about wraps it up. I hope you enjoyed the welterweight tier list, people. I've been thinking about maybe doing another one of these using a different weight class. I think the main two are lightweight and heavyweight. If you want to see those or you want to see any other weight classes, do let me know. Anyway, I'll catch us later. I don't normally say this, but make sure you subscribe. We're closing in on 700 subs, and that would be quality. So if we can get that by Christmas, that would be superb. If not, you're fucking useless. I want different people watching me content. But anyway, no. Obviously, I love you lot. You're a bunch of legends. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. Just hit me fucking table there. Anyway, I'll catch you later.